I never imagined that a quiet Saturday morning in our peaceful neighborhood would turn into the day my patience, my profession, and my love as a father would be tested to their absolute limits. Before we even comment which country you're watching from, I want to know how far this story travels, because what happened that day should never happen to anyone's child. The sun was barely up and the smell of fresh cut grass drifted through the air.
My daughter Lee, only 13, sat on the porch wrapped in her soft blue blanket, her oxygen tank beside her. Like always, she was born with a weak heart, and though it learned to live with it every breath she took felt like something I had to protect with my life. The birds were chirping, and I remember thinking how peaceful everything felt before the storm came. I was making coffee in the kitchen, half watching her through the window as she colored in her sketchbook. Our neighborhood was managed by the HOA, and everyone knew. The infamous Karen, the self-appointed enforcer who thought she was above every rule and everyone else. She had already complained about Lily's oxygen tubes cluttering the porch and once told me to keep hospital stuff inside where it belongs. I brushed it off back then because I knew people like her feed on attention. But that day she crossed a line so vile that even my training as police chief couldn't prepare me for the sight. I was about to see the first clue something was wrong was the barking my neighbor's dog Max wouldn't stop. His deep growl echoed down the street. Then came a metallic clanking sound. Chains. I frowned, grabbed my mug, and stepped out the front door. The same before me froze me in place. There was Karen standing on my porch with a smug expression, her phone in one hand and a thick metal chain in the other wrapped around the porch railing. And Lily's rice. My daughter was trembling, her lips pale, tears in her eyes. Karen was ranting, her shrill voice cutting through the morning air. If you can control your junk, maybe this will remind you that rules exist for a reason. I dropped my coffee mug right there to shattered on the concrete. But I didn't hear it. My blood went cold and boiled in the same breath. I rushed forward, my voice low. But dangerous. Karen, what the hell do you think you're doing? She didn't flinch. She stood her ground like she was justified, like chaining a sick child was somehow part of her duty. Your daughter's been leaving that Max and outside for days, she said, waving toward the oxygen tank. It violates community ethics standards. I called the HOA and they said I could take action. My daughter whimpered, clutching her chest. That sound, that weak, terrified sound, was enough to tear through every ounce of restraint. I moved to unhook the chain, but Karen stepped between us, her hand raised like a stop sign. Don't touch it, she sapped. You'll only make this worse. I could smell the cheap perfume she always drenched herself in, sharp, artificial, suffocating. My heart pounded in my ears, every muscle in my body screamed to act. But years of training forced me to pause to assess. Her phone was recording, of course it was. You're trespassing and assaulting my daughter, I said through clenched teeth. That's a felony. Karen laughed, the kind of laugh people use when they think they're untouchable. Go ahead, call the cops, she smirked. Let's see who they believe. I looked at my daughter's pale face, her breathing shallow, the metal biting into her skin, and at that moment Karen had no idea the man she was challenging was the very authority she thought she could manipulate. I reached for my phone, but my hands were trembling, not from fear, but from the sheer rage bubbling inside me. I took a deep breath and forced my tone to stay calm. Lily, sweetheart, don't move. Breathe slowly. Okay, she nodded weakly, her voice barely a whisper. That it hurts. My jaw tightened. Karen was still standing there, holding her phone like a trophy, recording everything. You're abusing your power as a homeowner, she spat. I have full authority from the HOA to handle violations. I stepped closer, lowering my voice to a quiet growl. You have 5 seconds to remove the chain cord. I'll make sure you regret this more than you can imagine. Her eyes flickered unsure for a split second, but her arrogance pulled her right back, threatening a resentment. Typically, you think your little badge gives you power. Here she mocked. I hadn't told anyone in the neighborhood that I was the police chief. I preferred peace over intimidation. But in that moment I realized she didn't deserve that peace. Anymore. I leaned forward until we were inches apart. You think you know power, I said softly. You don't have the faintest idea. I pulled my badge from my jacket pocket and let the sun hit it. The silver gleam reflected right into her eyes. For the first time her smirk faltered. What is that supposed to mean? She stammered.
It means you just committed assault and unlawful restraint against the daughter of the chief of police. I said, my voice steady, now cold and final. She froze, eyes wide, her phone shaking in her hand. You're lying, she muttered. This is some kind of trick. I didn't respond.
Instead, I pulled out my radio and called it in. This is Chief Harlan. I need a patrol at my residence immediately. We have a civilian detaining a minor with physical restraint. The words hung heavy in the air. Karen's face drained of color. You can't do this.
In part of the whole board, she protested. I turned toward my daughter and gently unclipped the chain. My hands steady despite the storm inside me. The metal links clattered to the porch, leaving faint red marks around Lily's wrist. I wrapped her hand in mine. It's okay, baby. It's over, I whispered. But it wasn't over, not yet. By then the commotion had drawn attention. Curtains moved, doors opened. Neighbors peeked out, whispering to each other. The sound of approaching sirens echoed down the street. Karen backed away, her face twisted with panic. This isn't what it looks like, she yelled toward the gathering crowd. She was entering the neighborhood. I was trying to help. I turned, standing tall, my uniform beneath, my jacket now visible. As I zipped it down, gasps rippled through the small crowd. Help, I repeated, stepping forward. You chained a sick child to a porch, Karen. You endangered her life for a made-up rule. She opened her mouth to argue, but her voice broke into incoherent excuses. I didn't know she was sick. How was I supposed to know? I stepped closer, lowering my voice again. You didn't need to know. You just needed to care. The patrol car pulled up, lights flashing red and blue across her shocked face. Officers stepped out, and recognition flashed in their eyes as they saw me. I nodded slightly, maintaining professionalism. Detain her for unlawful restraint and endangerment of a minor, I ordered. Karen stumbled backward, shaking her head as the cuffs clicked around her wrists. This is a mistake. You can't arrest me. I have rights, she cried out, twisting against the officer's grip. I looked her dead in the eyes and said quietly, and so does my daughter, as Karen was led to the patrol car. The crowd fell silent. The flashing lights painted her face in streaks of red and blue as she shouted over her shiver, you'll regret this. The whole will hear about it. But no one answered. Every neighbor who had once smiled proudly at her now looked away in disgust. I turned to Lily, who was sitting weakly on the porch steps, her oxygen tube back in place, her small fingers clutching the sketchbook she'd dropped earlier. I knelt beside her, brushing her hair from her face. You okay, sweetheart? She nodded slowly, her lips trembling. Him okay? Now that hearing that broke me. I pulled her close, my arms tight around her, feeling her heart beat steady against my chest. For the first time that morning, I let myself breathe. An ambulance arrived moments later, and the paramedics checked her vitals. While I gave my statement, the whole president himself showed up, red-faced and flustered, trying to explain how Karen had misinterpreted their rules. We never authorized her to act like this, he insisted, his voice shaking. I fixed him with a look that could cut steel. Then you had better make sure your board understands the difference between guidelines and human decency, I said flightly. He nodded, unable to meet my eyes. Karen sat in the back of the squad car, her earlier arrogance gone, replaced by disbelief. She kept muttering, I didn't mean to hurt anyone, over and over, but her words sounded empty against the hum of justice catching up to her. Later that evening, after everything settled, I sat with Lily on the porch again. The same porch that had witnessed cruelty hours earlier now glowed softly under the porch light. The scent of rain drifted through the air. She was resting her head on my shoulder, her breathing steady. Dad, she whispered, why would someone do that to me? I swallowed hard before answering, because some people confuse power with goodness. They think making others small makes them strong. She nodded slowly, her eyes thoughtful. But you stopped her, I smiled faintly, pressing a kiss to her forehead. I didn't stop her because in the chief, Lily. I stopped her because in your dad. The next day, news of the incident spread across the neighborhood. Karen was charged and banned from the whole board permanently. The board issued a public apology, promising to review every policy that had given her an excuse to act like a tyrant. Some of the neighbors came by with flowers and cards for Lily, their faces guilty and kind. Even Max, the dog, who had barked the warning, got an extra treat from us. But as the days went on, I couldn't stop